Check. Check 1, 2. Check, check, check. Chuckity chuckle, the chocolate chicken. Hey, this is Chuck Huber, Dr. Leonard McCoy from Star Trek Continues. I'm a doctor, not a DJ. But I know that you are listening to the biggest little show this side of the Alpha Quadrant. It's the Trek Geeks podcast with Bill Smith and Dan Davidson.
Coming to you from Podfleet Command via the Remler Array or the Argus Array or whatever arrays are out there, straight across subspace and into your ears. It's the biggest little show this side of the Alpha Quadrant and your independent Star Trek podcast. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Trek Geeks. I'm your co-host, Bill Smith. We're excited that you're here. It's episode 126, and we've got a great discussion on tap today. By we, of course, I mean my co-host and I. It's not a well-known fact, but he was supposed to be in that transporter accident scene in Star Trek The Motion Picture and just never showed up to work that day. So we were almost rid of him before we got started. A boy can dream. Anyway, he's Dan Davidson. Dan, welcome aboard, buddy. I'm looking forward to today.
What we got back didn't live long, fortunately. Thanks. I'm glad I didn't show up for work that day. That would have been a mess of disgustingness on the bottom of the transporter pad. And we wouldn't have been here on our 126th episode of us being brothers and talking Star Trek. You're the best, man.
Well, see, we had an insult-free Friday a couple of weeks ago, and that was hard to take, but this is 10 times worse.
And it's also fake now, so whatever. Get going. Let's go. No, it's always a pleasure to be here, man. Love it. Love recording Trek Geeks. Great topic today. Good stuff to talk about. Fun stuff to talk about. And I'm looking forward to it.
You know, it's amazing because, 5-10 years ago, I don't think I would have really wanted to have talked about this topic today. And I'm excited because, over time, this has become one of my favorite Star Trek movies.
Yeah, I got to admit that I don't think I've ever had a really negative feel, and we might as well, surprise everybody what we're talking about. It's almost 40 years old, or it's over 40 years old now, I believe. We're talking Star Trek The Motion Picture today. Want to deep dive into it, talk about it, what we liked, what we didn't like. But it's one that I've always enjoyed, and just like you, though, my appreciation and love for the film has grown in leaps and bounds over the years. I absolutely love the movie, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about it, because it seems to be people either love it or hate it, and there's really no in between. So it'll be a great discussion, I think.
40 years next year, believe it or not, in 79 to 2019. So you're very close. Math is hard, though.
It is. Close but wrong, which is usually the case. So that's all right.
You know what else is hard, Dan, is telling people how they can get in touch with us to tell us about their Star Trek The Motion Picture experiences. How might they do that, sir?
Well, actually, it's easier than ever before to get in touch with us, Bill. You can head right on over to trekgeeks.com/contact, and there you can find a variety of ways to send us your thoughts on Star Trek The Motion Picture or anything else Star Trek or non-Star Trek related, and we want to hear from you. So you can leave us a voicemail, you can Skype chat us, and you can even fill out the contact form and send us a message directly from that very website. Plus, don't forget, you can click the big blue button over on the right side of the website and leave us a voice message. I did the same thing last week. Message. Math is hard. So is English. Using SpeakPipe. And hey, you know what, guys? We talk about it every single week. We love talking about it. We love all the people there. head right on over to our official Facebook group, Camp Kittimer. There's always great things going on over there. There's talk, there's pictures, there's contest, all Star Trek related. There's Trek Tuesday, which is always fun. Plus, you'll get early access to episodes of the Trek Geek podcast before they are even released to the general population. So that's always cool. To join the group, head right on over to facebook.com/groups/Camp Kittimer. And one of our wonderful admins, Heather, Jackie, or Dan, will let you right in to join in on all the fun. But please remember that any comments or messages that you leave us in any of these places may be used in a future episode. Bill.
Thank you, Dan. That was fantastic. Or should I just start calling you Ruck?
Oh, that would be very nice.
For us, maybe. Maybe not so much for everyone else. Dan, it's time for the news from TrekNews.net. Spanning the Alpha Quadrant. For all the news on all the Star Treks. It's TrekNews.net. Online at TrekNews.net. See, I never know when you're going to end it.
I could have gone for, I had a big breath. It could have gone for a long time.
I was waiting for you to go Stratosphere. Let's face it, at your age, you would have run out of breath and gone, kill Spock.
Very good.
That's not what we came to Vulcan for, is it? So yeah, the news, TrekNews.net. We love those guys. And Dan, up first, this is a story you and I are both incredibly excited about because as we record this, we've broken the 200-day barrier. There's 199 days until we get to STLV in August, and the newest Starfleet captain will also be there.
I am so psyched about this. I am going to have to be saving my Quatloos for a long time because I see myself getting lots and lots of pictures and autographs if people are available to do that. And the biggest name right now for me right now is Jason Isaacs. Captain Gabriel Lorca himself has been added to the guest list for Star Trek Las Vegas in the first week of August. Oh my God, that is so awesome. I am just like dancing on clouds right now with this news. He is already joining a very healthy dose of Discovery cast, which includes so far Mary Chieffo, Kenneth Mitchell, and James Frain. And he was not there last year, so I'm very excited about that as well. But the captain of Discovery. I can't wait. I can't wait to see him on stage. I want him to talk like a Scottish engineer or anything else that he wants to do. He can throw some Malfoy in there if he wants to, and I'll be excited. I'm just beside myself with happiness.
This brings the total of this recording to the number of guests at Star Trek Las Vegas to 61. Also added this week were Gates McFadden, Jonathan Frakes, LeVar Burton, and the incomparable Michael Westmore. And rumor has it that Westmore is going to turn a celebrity into a Cardassian on stage this year at STLV. And I can only hope it's Casey Biggs.
Oh, okay. I was going to say Mark Alimo, but either one would be fantastic. Oh, that's something I will sit in that room for all day.
Oh wait. What about Andy Robinson?
Oh, gee. What are you're killing me, man. You're killing me. Oh,
I want to change my vote. I'm hoping for Andy.
I want to change my vote. You know, if he wants to pick anybody from the audience to do it, I'll sacrifice myself to go up there.
I've been hoping you'd sacrifice yourself for years.
Of course, have.
Captain, the maids are back on the line. Bless you, Scotty. Go, Sulu. Yeah, I'm psyched. I can only hope. Oh man, just think. Okay, so we got Jason Isaacs, we've got Mary Chieffo, we got Kenneth Mitchell, we got James Frain. Dude, we still have 6 months for them to announce the possibility of Sonequa Martin Green, and that would just be incredible if that happens. It's not been announced; it's not even rumored yet. But wouldn't that be amazing?
It would be amazing. You know, any one of the cast members is going to be huge because, of course, Discovery is so popular and fresh right now. I would love, and I'd be a fool and pay the money probably if they get like Doug Jones or Sonequa, Mary Wiseman. God, I want Mary Wiseman to be there, and have cast photo like they've done with all of the other shows. That would just be amazing. This first year of Discovery, can you imagine having all of the big names there for a cast photo with you and I sitting there looking like big goofs? Oh, I would just think it was great.
Well, the one good part is Michael Dorn won't be in that photo because it's not going to take me 5 years to get his autograph, for God's sake.
That's very true.
I bet you they'd be at their tables.
Ouch.
Yeah, just saying. Dan, moving on. Speaking of Star Trek Discovery, and again, this is, there are no spoilers here about Discovery on this podcast. Right. Eagle Moss, the company that makes all those amazing tiny little starships that we've seen for the last couple of years and hear about other places, has introduced its Discovery line of ships, and they are really starting off strong.
They're starting off very strong. Now, I thought this was a great story because when I started working at my new place, you welcomed me with a very nice cube gift, so to speak, and that is the Enterprise large version, which is gorgeous. So now Eagle Moss has introduced the Discovery line of ships. There are 12 ships in the initial launch of this product, 7 Federation and 5 Klingon. I'm going to give you the web address a couple of times so that you'll have it. It's eaglemoss.com/Discovery Starships if you want to read up about cost and subscriptions and so forth. But there are going to be a lot of ships. Like I said, 12 ships. On the Federation side, you have ships that include the Shenzhou, the Discovery, of course, but also others that we saw at the Battle of the Binary Stars, which is kind of cool, including the Jaeger, the Shran, cool name, and others. And over on the Klingon side, you get a Bird of Prey, the new Bird of Prey, or the old Bird of Prey, depending on how you want to look at it, because it's in the past. And there are others as well for the Klingon ships, which you can check out at eaglemoss.com/Discovery Starships. But noticeably not included is the Klingon sarcophagus ship, which is very interesting. But there is a reason for that. It is so intricate and so detailed that the ship is going to have to require a larger version. So we'll have to keep our eyes out for a giant Klingon ship of the dead. The collection is separate from the other Star Trek Starships collection that has been in production for a while now, and that has over 120 ships, I believe is the number. And the Discovery ships, very interestingly, will be larger than those in the Star Trek Starships collection. So once again, check it out at eaglemoss.com/Discovery Starships and get your collection started, my friend.
Those ships look amazing. My problem is I don't have room for any of these.
Yes, that is a problem.
I literally, I mean, we're full up here at the inn, and I have to buy a new house to have room for all my Star Trek stuff.
Well, I am going to be buying a new house, so now I'm going to have a new room added on. So that might be something I have to look at.
Housewarming.
Exactly.
No, that's not going to go over well.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, you got a cubicle. That's all I'm saying.
That's true. I do.
You could put it there.
I can put them all there.
Oh, all the starships. Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't want anybody coming over and, taking them and dropping them or anything.
Oh, shut up, Dan. Last night, or the other day, perhaps, New York Times bestselling author Dayton Ward had an interesting tweet that looked pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah. He had a very nice tweet. Very, very cool. He tweeted out a picture, and he was very excited. You could tell just by what he wrote in the tweet. But this picture was a box. And what might be in that box, you're asking, Bill? Well, in that box.
What might be in that box, Dan?
That is a very good question, my illustrious executive producer. The first copies of his new Discovery book, Drastic Measures, was in this picture. And it looks like it's going to be a kick-ass book, man.
It really does. When you read the back of the dust cover, I can't wait to get my hands on this book. I might buy it in physical form and in audiobook format simply so I can listen to it in the car. Like I've done with David Mack's book, Desperate Hours.
Yes.
I almost did what you did earlier.
I did, exactly.
But here's the description on the back of the dust cover. You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's see if this grabs you.
Okay.
It's 2246, 10 years prior to the battle at the Binary Stars, and an aggressive contagion is ravaging the food supplies of the remote Federation colony, Tarsus 4. and the 8,000 people who call it home. Distress signals have been sent, but any meaningful assistance is weeks away. Lieutenant Commander Gabriel Lorca and a small team assigned to a Starfleet monitoring outpost are caught up in the escalating crisis and bear witness as the colony's governor, Adrian Kodos, employs an unimaginable solution in order to prevent mass starvation. While awaiting transfer to her next assignment, Commander Philippa Giorgio is tasked with leading to Tarsus for a small, hastily assembled group of first responders. It's hoped that this advance party can help stabilize the situation until more aid arrives, but Giorgio and her team discovered that they're too late. Governor Kodos has already implemented his heinous strategy for extending the colony's besieged food stores and safeguarding the community's long-term survival. In the midst of their rescue mission, Giorgio and Lorca must now hunt for the architect of this horrific tragedy and the man whom history will one day brand Kodos the Executioner. Oh my word.
Wow. I am tired. Oh my God, that's awesome. Even my dog Aria is like freaking out over it right now. You can probably hear in the background. She's very excited. She wants to read it.
Conscience of the King is one of my favorite TOS episodes. It always has been. And I love that there's a Discovery tie into this now that tells some of that story. I can't wait.
Oh, because
we're going to get awesome. We're going to get Kevin Riley. We're going to get James Kirk.
Oh,
possibly we're going to get a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm very excited.
I don't want to give any spoilers for people who may not have read Desperate Hours, but there's some great tie-ins in that as well. I think both authors have done a great job, or I'm assuming that Dayton's, because he's a great author, will also have some amazing storylines with some tie-ins. So, head over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever you shop your collection of Star Trek printed awesomeness and pre-order this new awesome Star Trek Discovery book, Drastic Measures. I've already pre-ordered mine, and I'm sure that Bill has already pre-ordered his.
I have. I think it's out the first week in February. I think the 6th possibly, but it's coming soon, man. I can't wait.
It's going to be great.
Recently, we had the occasion to go back and reconsider the first Star Trek movie. And I watched it after the series finale for Star Trek Continues so that I could have that continuity. And it made me think, well, maybe we should talk about this on the podcast because Star Trek The Motion Picture has a lot to talk about. And I don't think that this is something I would have considered even 3 years ago when we started this podcast.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I like the fact that you brought up that it's good to watch right after the final episode of Star Trek Continues, because that series had that perfect bridge between TOS and the movie. And no spoilers, but the last episode of Star Trek Continues takes place kind of close to where Star Trek The Motion Picture opens up. So it's kind of cool to see that. And yeah, we've talked about Star Trek The Motion Picture a lot over the years, you and I, not on the show. And what we like and what we dislike about it. And, now that the 50th anniversary has gone by and the 40th anniversary is creeping up on this movie, it's a good topic to talk about. And I'm looking forward to the discussion, to be quite honest with you.
Oh, as am I, because, for the longest time, this was the movie I watched whenever I was sick, because honestly, it would put me to sleep.
Well,
no, I'm being honest, because back in the day, I mean, that's kind of how I viewed it. I would get the chance to check out, and it was comfort food, and I could just zone. But now it's totally different. I mean, I watch this, and I'd rediscover things and discover new things that I never really realized about this movie. And I'm excited to talk about it today. So, as you'll recall, this movie came out in 1979, so we're really just sort of 2 years removed from the whole Star Wars, epic introduction to the planet, and that played a heavy part into the development of this movie. And I suppose my first question is that do you think that popular opinion of Star Wars affected how people received Star Trek: The Motion Picture?
That's a good question. I think at the time, because look at today, how they go through these whole, peaks and valleys of what they're releasing for movies, of what the popular thing is at the time. Vampires was one thing a few years ago, and I use that as an example. I think that it had a very big impact on the motion picture. Star Wars was the thing back in the mid 70s. It was on a level that I had never seen before because I had not really gotten into my Star Trek fandom at the time. I was a huge Star Wars fan, just like any young boy or girl might have been back in the 70s. And, it was something that we had never seen. It was epic. Like you said, that first scene with the planet is just amazing. And I think it did have. I think it did have an impact on the motion picture. I'm wondering, and I have to ask if maybe Paramount said, okay, so they've got this big space movie. We got to do something now, and what better not to do it with than with Star Trek that went off the air almost 10 years ago from the time that the movie was released in 79. And I think it did play. I mean, you get these grand space scenes in TMP, which kind of mirror some of the scenes that we see in Star Wars. So I think it had a big impact on it.
From my perspective, I think that the big matinee style of Star Wars, where there was action and fun stuff, kind of colored the perception of people going to see Star Trek. Because, space was big again. Mm-hmm. Space stuff was big in the mid 60s. But that's because we were going to the moon and it was different, right? There was more space stuff on television. The types of space stuff that was on television was different. And now in the wake of Star Wars, everything was supposed to be a bold adventure and perhaps a space opera to some degree. And Star Trek comes out, and it is the only thing it has in common with Star Wars is that there's star in the title.
Right.
It is as different a movie as it could be. Whereas Star Trek is more of a movie. I think that Star Trek the Motion Picture is a film, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I think that one of the things that also stands out with the motion picture is, in the 70s, technology with movies was starting to advance a little bit, and we saw it with Star Wars. But then we saw special effects to a level that we had never seen with Star Trek: The Motion Picture. And as you said, it's a film. It's as different from Star Wars as you can get. But the idea, I think, to throw as much special effects to show what they could do was also a big factor in the creation of this movie. Because as the people who don't like it say, all they're doing is showing these exterior shots of V'ger and the Enterprise and special effects this and special effects that. There's so much more to it, but I think at the time people were looking at it as, oh my God, look at what they have done with the Enterprise and special effects in this movie.
Do you remember the first time you realized there was a Star Trek movie coming out, and how far in advance of the actual movie premiere in December of 79 was it?
I don't recall how far before the movie it was, but I do remember I had, when I first started watching Star Trek, it wasn't something that I wanted to watch, as we've talked about. My brother was the one who decided what we watched after school and after dinner. And I did start watching it, and I started liking it, but I wasn't like a rabid fan yet. So when it was announced that it was coming out, I don't really remember how excited I was, but I do remember my anticipation building right before the movie opened. And as we've talked about on this show before, it opened at a theater in Nashua called the Brant on Main Street. I vividly remember the night that we went. I don't recall if it was the first night or not, but the night that we went, they still had the gigantic spotlights that would go back and forth in the sky like a big Hollywood event. And the line for the movie was wrapped around all the way back behind the theater down into the parking lot, which I had never experienced before. That was really amazing. So the anticipation was there for a lot of people. I just don't remember how much I was looking forward to it before we actually went to see it.
I remember, I want to say it was that fall. At the time, I was a child living in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I remember walking to the convenience store one day, and typically I would go to get a can of Barrelhead root beer because I loved root beer. And back then soda was like $0.25 for a can.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at the rack of comic books that this convenience store had. And it was a small rack. It's not like it was a comic book store at all. But I was looking at an issue of Batman, and inside the back cover there was an ad for Star Trek, for Star Trek the Motion Picture. It looked like a poster, and I still remember the poster to this day. It had a big shot of the Enterprise and had little photos of the entire cast at the bottom. And I got that issue of the comic book just for that back cover for Star Trek. I was so excited. It's like, oh, there's going to be a Star Trek movie like in the theater. Oh my word, this is awesome. And at the time, there were still like Star Trek trading cards that were on the market, and I would get those too because I was fairly deep into my love for Star Trek. Although, like I've said, I would never admit it to my big brother at the time. But I want to say that was a few months before, and I do remember seeing the movie trailer because I'm pretty sure it was narrated by Orson Welles. And I can't remember what movie I saw it before, to be honest. But yeah, I was pretty jazzed by the time I got to December of '79 to go see that movie.
It's
to
funny.
Be honest.
It's funny when you're talking about your first memory of that advertisement in the Batman comic. It sparked a memory in me, and I don't know when it was, but my brother was a Trek fan, obviously, and a science fiction fan before I got into it, and he used to get Starlog magazine all the time.
Yes.
And I believe there was an issue that had a special cover in regards to TMP before the movie came out. And I remember looking through that, and that started piquing my interest, which is when I started probably getting excited for the movie. But again, I'm not sure when that was in relation to the release of the film.
Yeah, back in the day, Starlog was all we had. I mean, there was no internet. Starlog was like the source for news on stuff like this. And yeah, I remember that every time. I remember begging my parents to let me get an issue of Starlog in any given month. Because that was the tie, right? I mean, and they would have photos, and I do remember that cover with the new Enterprise. I'm like going, wow, that's the Enterprise?
Yeah.
Really?
I think if I remember correctly, the Enterprise was on the cover, and also kind of a worm's eye view, maybe from belt level, of Kirk in his new uniform, which is something that we had not seen, of course. We're used to the primary color uniforms. But yeah, I remember that really vividly. I mean, it was Starlog, and I was a big horror fan growing up. So Fangoria magazine and Starlog magazine were the ones that were always big in our house.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was the only one who really paid attention to my sci-fi stuff. And nobody else in the house really did. So yeah, I was alone.
That's okay. You're not alone now.
No, and that's the best part. So we go to the movie, right? And I mean, us individually, it's not like we knew each other back then because we certainly didn't. And we see the movie, and we come out of the movie, and what did you think?
That I've said it before. The motion picture, what started my obsession, quote unquote, with Star Trek. It was exciting for me, as slow as the movie could have been in parts. This was the first time I was really in depth watching what was going on with Star Trek. And it was new. It wasn't the episodes that we've seen over and over and over again. And you can quote even at, 9 and 10 years old. I was thrilled. I just was like, oh my God, this was great. Of course, I think part of the Star Wars factor still played into it. I'm like, oh my God, another space movie. This is going to be great. I loved the Enterprise, which we'll get into later on. But I was hooked. That was what hooked me into really, really getting into Star Trek. And then, of course, when Star Trek 2 came out, it was just like, forget about it. So yeah, absolutely. I loved it. I thought it was great. I love hearing your story about what you thought.
I fell asleep.
Okay, I was drinking when you said that, and I wasn't expecting it so fast.
And my brother fell asleep because he took me we went to a matinee at the Bedford Mall when there used to be a theater there, because that's the same place I saw Star Wars. And I felt bad because I fell asleep during the movie. My brother had taken me to this. We watched Star Trek for years, and we're in the car, and I confessed that I fell asleep. He's like, yeah, don't worry about it. I fell asleep too. It's okay. And it was for most of my adult life that I understood why this was called Star Trek the Motionless Picture, because it's not exactly like there's a lot to engage kids,
Absolutely. That's a great point, Bill. even though I was a kid and you were a kid at the time, it's not going to hold a youngster's attention very long, I don't think, especially if you're watching the full extended version on DVD or something like that. It's got a lot of slowness in it, and it's got a lot of things that kids might not find exciting at all. But it piqued my interest, I got to say.
Well, I think it piques our interest now as adults, but certainly back then, I mean, not so much. Kids. Well, let's look at the rating for this movie. It was rated G. It was the only one of the films to ever be rated G. And that's going to immediately draw parents who say, oh, I can take my kids to this, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that is certainly, I'm sure, part of what went on. And so you get there and you're hoping, I'm sure a lot of kids are hoping for Star Wars, and they get Star Trek. And there was probably a good number of them who didn't quite understand exactly what that meant.
Right.
And the thing that always gets me is that, when this movie finally came out on VHS, it had its own special cover. There was a big yellow blob at the top. It's a special longer version, 12 minutes of new footage. And little do you know, that footage is all the Enterprise flying through V'ger with reactions.
And reactions of just people staring straight ahead, not saying anything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fantastic, isn't it? Oh, this is what movies are meant to do. So yeah, I understand why people, I guess I can relate to on some level why people don't like Star Trek, the motion picture. Perhaps they want more action. Perhaps they want more engagement. But when you think about it, this is Star Trek, for television on the big screen. I mean, this is a Gene script. We can debate whether or not it's a rehash of some other elements of Star Trek some other time, or maybe we can even do that later. But this is probably the most Star Trek of all the Star Trek films. And it was the perfect exposure to people who've never seen Star Trek.
I think at the time, absolutely. We've talked about how every movie has been, or one of the things that people talk about, our dear friend Heather talks about, is every series or every movie is someone's first Star Trek. And you're right. We had had the 3 seasons of the original series, and we had the animated series, and then a break of really nothing. And then we're thrust into this giant cinematic adventure, which, you're right, is the purest form of quote unquote what Star Trek is. And I think that this was one of the big examples of, this is what drew people into Star Trek moments, was this movie, regardless of whether the movie's good, bad, slow, fast, adventure, drama. It just pulled people in at the time. And it might've been the biggest example out of all the films that did that.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's very true. It's not to say there aren't problems with Star Trek, the motion picture. There are problems with every Star Trek movie, even Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which people still hold up as, the pinnacle of Star Trek movies, and rightfully so. I mean, Gene had some obvious challenges in writing this script. I don't know if he was the best writer for this script, honestly, because it suffers from some things, but it told a story that was very much about the positive future of humanity and about how we aspire to something greater. And I think that's really what TMP drives home for me now. Whereas before I was hoping for, something a little more adventure driven, kind of like Star Trek on television. Because let's face it, there's a lot of adventure there, even though there are some amazing stories about humanity being greater than it is. But that doesn't occur in Star Trek, the motion picture. I don't know if this film works with any other director than Robert Wise, because I think he gave it the care and feeding it needed to give it this amazing grand look in this universe, and also allow the story to be told the way it should be told.
It's interesting you say that, because I was recently reading an article about the motion picture on Entertainment Weekly's website. And I agree with you. Robert Wise was really the only person who could have directed this film. But at the same time, there's discussion about how Robert Wise almost destroyed Star Trek Forever but at the same time also saved it forever with this movie. And that's kind of interesting that it could be that drastic on both sides, but it really happened. And they go on in that article to talk about he may have been one of the biggest problems or biggest saviors of Star Trek. And the only other person who's higher on that list of either saving or destroying Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I agree with that.
It's an amazing read. Check it out.
I have to agree with that 100%. There's a lot to this movie because they start essentially rebuilding the universe.
Mm-hmm.
It creates a continuity which we didn't necessarily intend for, that we still live with today, except we call it canon, right, which is really a term for writers than it is for anything else, because it denotes its various religious connotations. But there's a fully formed story here that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it serves to bring all these characters we haven't seen in new stories for 10 years together. And I think that's the best part. So, you're a young kid, you're 9 years old, you're sitting in this theater in Nashua, and, we've said many times that there's no Star Trek without Spock.
Right.
What was your reaction the first time Spock came on the screen?
I was like, why does he look so weird? I really did. I mean, he had the long hair. I mean, it's on Vulcan, of course, is the first time we see him. Like, what's going on? He never had long hair like that, and he had this funny looking outfit on, and we see the matte paintings of Vulcan, and I'm like, what's going on? And I also remember later on in the movie, as it was taking place, it's like, what's up with his voice? His voice is like, it's dropped 4 octaves from what we remember in the original series. I was a little like, what's the deal here? And I didn't understand the whole idea of Kolinar at the time, or what he was doing, and what is this purging of emotions that doesn't make any sense. I will say, it was confusing for me back then. Like we talked about it, kids watching this for the first time might not understand what's going on. That was a perfect example where I didn't understand.
I have to say that the movie finally felt like Star Trek to me at that point, once Spock was on the screen, even as a kid,
mm-hmm,
because that element is missing up until then. Of course, there's the bit with the Vulcan science officer who winds up dying in the transporter accident.
mm-hmm.
The last one available. Kirk's like, I'd really like a Vulcan there.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, really? Come on, buddy. Seriously? Lots of people know sciencey type stuff. And then Spock comes on. It's like, oh, it's Spock. Even as a kid, I really felt this sort of nostalgia for the character, because I felt that tied to Spock, even as a 9-year-old, And so I thought that scene with Chekhov was a little clunky of sorts. Grand Ted. Yeah.
Well, let me jump in on that, because that's what I was going to point out. The beginning part, when you see him on Vulcan, was very confusing to me. I was so excited when he arrived on the Enterprise, but then at the same time, that very scene where Chekhov is just elated to see him, and I'm like, wow, Spock's really being a jerk. As he just kind of like walks off. It's like, okay, what's going on? I really didn't feel like, oh, now this is Star Trek with Spock, until we saw him in a uniform, I think, now that I think back on it.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the other things I really like about this movie is the iteration of the Enterprise that we get. Okay, we're going to throw the fact that it's got all kinds of differences, and there's no way it could be the same ship from the TV series out the window. And we're just going to pretend that it is. Mm-hmm. It is, for me, still, when I think of the Enterprise, it's that version of the Enterprise I think of. On my desk here at home, I have that Enterprise. On my desk at work, I have that Enterprise. It's the version that spoke to me. I love its lines. I love the different warp nacelles. I love the angles we get of the Enterprise in this movie. And I really think that's how I fell in love with this particular design, especially when it's in space dock and you get that view from the top of the port nacelle from the aft view, looking at the rest of the ship during the Starship porn scene. And when Kirk and Scotty are flying around the Enterprise to that music, and it's gorgeous. It's such a beautiful score behind it, and the visuals are amazing. That's why I call it Starship porn. And But it really is, when I think of the Enterprise, that's the version I think of now, because I fell in love with it all over again.
Let me tell you a little story about my thoughts on the Enterprise refit.
Yeah.
It was Star Trek the Motion Picture that first started me getting interested when I was a kid and through my early teenage years, maybe, of building models. And the very first model I built was because of this movie. I got the my folks got me the Enterprise, and not a Snap-on model, which I had done when I was littler or more little, whatever the word is, but a real model where I had to like do the gluing and the painting and everything like that. And I did the Enterprise, and I can see it so vividly in my mind. The angles of the warp nacelles and the way the warp nacelles worked. And this was the first model that I ever did where they had like decals, and you had to cut them out and then wet them and then put them on the model. And that was like the worst thing in the world for me. I couldn't figure out how it was ever going to stay there, but doing the painting and stuff like that, it was the first time I really did a model because I loved the ship so much. It is so gorgeous in this movie. And it might not be the one that I think of first when I think of the Starship Enterprise, but it's the most beautiful one, I think. Definitely.
I absolutely agree with that. I have to tell you, slight tangent. So Star Trek 3 comes out, and of course, the Enterprise meets her fate in that movie. I cried.
Devastated.
I was in middle school at that point, and I cried because I was more affected by that than I was by the death of Spock in Star Trek 2, but that's a topic for another time.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that model, and I think I traded it. I traded for it to get it from a kid I knew at the time. And I was so bummed out, and I got angry at some point that they destroyed the Enterprise, that I took that model, and there was a hole in the bottom of it. That's how it was when I got it. And I filled it full of firecrackers. God's honest truth. And I lit those firecrackers ablaze. And I got to tell you, that model did not hold up so well. It's like, well, if they're going to destroy the Enterprise, I'm going to destroy the Enterprise. In hindsight, man, I wish I kept that model.
Yeah, I don't remember what happened to mine. I do remember that my mom was like very worried because that was the first time that I was using an X-Acto knife because you had to cut the skeleton off the parts. Memories of. I want to go get a model and build one now.
See, I think about that. Well, and then I see all kinds of people who do these amazing things with their models, and I'm like, I could never do that.
Let's add lights.
Let's add lights. Let's add things that aren't part of the model. Let's kit bash. I'm like, God, these people must have the patience of saints, because I'm lucky if I can get paint on there, for God's sake. And these people who have all like the different colored tiles on the Enterprise, like various gradations. I'm like, oh my God. I'm lucky if I can just snap it together.
I could tell you a tangent on that one real quick. Speaking of models, because Star Trek The Next Generation comes out, and of course the Enterprise D is new. I got a model of that. And you know how the Enterprise D, the saucer section especially, has like little squares. The whole thing is made up of these different tile squares. I painted every one of those squares with toothpicks.
Oh my word.
And there were a lot of them. I didn't want the paint to be like in between the bricks, so to speak, I'll call them. So I painted them with flat tip toothpicks, every single one.
I can't even imagine that. Yeah. That would drive me crazy. Now I'd rather build Legos, quite frankly.
Yeah. You think I don't have patience.
No, you only don't have patience with me. So, as we've kind of skipped around the notes we have, you have a note here called Dan's poster story.
Yes.
And I want to be sure we get to that, because I don't know if I know the story you're talking about, and I want to hear it.
I've never told you the story.
Oh, I can't wait then.
Yeah, it's a good story. You want to hear it now?
I think that's part of the reason why I brought it up. Yeah.
Okay, so as I've talked about before, my brother was more of a fan than I was to start the whole Star Trek journey. And it's because of him that I got into Star Trek. So the movies come out at this time. Like I said, he has Starlog, and we've seen the movie. And he had things in his room that were Star Trek related, including some posters. And one of these posters was specifically of the Star Trek motion picture Enterprise, but it was a poster that was like metallic, if that makes any sense. It
Oh,
had
wow.
this special sheen over it to make it look metal, and it would shine differently in the light. It was gorgeous. It was really, really nice. It had blues and all kinds of brilliant silvers and stuff like that. And I loved it. It was my favorite thing. I would actually go into his room and just stare at it from time to time. Now,
Oh, wow.
another thing that we used to do when we were younger is we would listen to the music, which we'll get into shortly. And what we would do is we would listen to the music, and I would just sit there and think of the movie and look at this poster. And I had the only thing I can call it is, those pointers, those silver pointers that are like car antennas. They look like car antennas, and you open them up to stretch them out. We had one of those, and I would use that as kind of like the Maestro's, whatever the heck you call it, when they're doing the music, and we would swing our arms back and forth to the music. And
So you would conduct the orchestra with a baton.
Yes, baton. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't think of the word. I was thinking of the Bugs Bunny version of when he's the maestro. But yeah, I would do that. And I remember one time in his room, the music playing, and I was in there, and I was very grandiosely, swaying my arms with this antenna, as I called it, and swinging it around the room, and dun, dun, and swung my arm, and the end of the baton hit that poster and scratched it right down through the center of it.
Oh my God.
And this is where I think I realized how big a fan I was. I wasn't so scared about my brother being mad. I was more upset that I damaged this beautiful picture of the Enterprise. And it was something that I always felt awful about. And that's my poster story. I don't know where that poster is right now, if he still has it, but it was earth shattering to me at the time that I had hit this and scratched it. It was, and I saw the scratch, like when you see a scratch on your car or a ding in the windshield, you focus in on that. It's like 1,000 times bigger than it really is. And all I saw in that poster from that point on was that scratch, and it killed me.
Oh my God. You are such a jerk.
Wow.
You have busted my stones for 20 years over dropping your Enterprise, which was a complete accident. And you, out of sheer carelessness, damaged a priceless collectible of your brother's. And I'm just hearing about this now. You are never going to hear the end of this, Maestro.
Maestro. Yeah, I think that might be why I have giving you such a hard time. It kind of makes me feel better about what I did to my brother's poster.
Because it was your own self-loathing, you jerk. Oh, I hate you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I can't wait to ask him about this.
Great. Thank you.
I'm going to ask him to leave us a speak pipe voicemail about this story when he discovered the tear in the poster.
You know what he's going to
scratch.
Say? I don't remember that.
Challenge accepted.
Beautiful.
So let's talk about some favorite scenes or moments or characters in this movie. Because there's a lot here, right? I mean, this is the first time we get to come back to these characters after a decade. Granted, not that much time passes in universe, but in real time, from the end of Turnabout Intruder to Star Trek: The Motion Picture, there's about 10 years.
Yeah.
So, what are some of your favorite moments in this movie?
Well, I'll talk about my favorite moment first, and it might be, the easy way out or the easy choice, but we talked about it a minute ago. The Enterprise porn scene is my favorite part of this movie for a couple of reasons. A, we get to see this ship for a long time, where we're focused, it's like 8 minutes or something like that. All kinds of different angles. But what really makes this scene work for me, and we've said this on the show many times, the music. The music is its own character in this movie, and it's one of the reasons why I love the movie as much as I do, is because this soundtrack is just unbelievable. And this particular scene with the music that's called The Enterprise playing just makes the scene. Even though you get Kirk and Shatner overacting, just looking around when he's looking and he looks down, he's got this dramatic look down. The scene is powerful. He's seeing the ship for the first time in a while. That is my favorite scene of the movie. I also have to say that the beginning scene of the movie, when we see the Klingon ship and V'ger, with that, again, the dramatic Klingon score, which people compare the Klingon score in Star Trek The Motion Picture to Darth Vader's Imperial March in Star Wars. I mean, they're so powerful. They're not the actual themes for the movie, but those particular scores are remembered. And that's one of them. We get to see Klingons for the first time in a different way. And I will say, for the longest time, I didn't believe anybody who said that was Mark Leonard in the captain's chair of the Klingon ship. I'm like, Spock's father's not going to be a Klingon. But that was one of my favorite scenes as well. I love that scene.
Spock's father's not going to be a Klingon. That's crazy talk. That's awesome.
Yep.
That's awesome. I love the Starship flyby. I have to say, I love the first time Spock comes on the bridge, and there's that very stilted dialogue, when everybody seems to get a word in before Kirk goes, Spock. I do love that scene, and Spock is just so cold and aloof, and like, oh yeah, I saw you guys. Yeah, what's up? Hey, I'm here.
Little did we know
Captain,
at the time that he was still dealing with Dr. McKenna's death.
Right? Oh, spoiler alert, Dan.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Sorry.
Oh,
It's been 2 months. Come on.
I also have to say, I love Persis Kambata's portrayal of Ilea and the Ilea probe. There's an interesting awkwardness to Ilea before she becomes the probe. And there's a lot of depth and warmth to her character. And then you get the complete opposite of that as soon as V'ger, snatches her up and turns her into this avatar, if you will. The Kirk unit, the whole whining bit. That was Kirk unit. One of the misfires for me in this movie is the casting of Stephen Collins as Decker. I don't really enjoy him in this role. It's got nothing to do with his current, revelations and situations. But even back then, I just didn't think it was a good fit with the rest of the cast. That's not to say he's not a bad actor, because certainly he does well with what they give him, but it didn't really work for me too much.
Sure.
I do have to say, though, I liked how they took the breadcrumbs there of the Decker-Ilea relationship and turned it into Riker and Troy in Star Trek The Next Generation. You can, that inspiration there is 100% obvious. And then I have to say, I love the end scene when they realize that it's a Voyager satellite and they have to key the final sequence in the code. That is just classic televised Star Trek to the nth degree, man. And it's executed very well.
Do you mean that entire scene, or the specific part where Voyager just like breaks itself so that it doesn't have to receive that code?
The whole scene, but that in particular.
Yeah, that's like, oh man.
Like, yeah, we're almost out of this. Oh, wait.
Right. I want to feed off of what you just said in regards to Ilea and Decker. First of all, I agree with you on both counts. I was a youngster at the time, so I think later on when I was watching it on VHS, I was like, a young teenage boy. I'm like, wow, Ilea's outfit is really short. And I was like, that is cool. But that being said, I agree with you 100% in regards to Decker. And one of the things that I think of now when I watch the show or the movie is, okay, Ilea is dead for all intents and purposes. She's dead.
Right. And
she's brought back as this avatar and not the blue one, which I was going to say earlier, but I figured I'd keep that one to myself. But I decided to say it now. It's like, Decker, dude. Or you could say, Geordi, it's not your mother. Picard, he's not your son. Decker, wipe that goofy looking smile off your face every time you're talking to Ilea the Pro, because it's not Ilea.
It's not Ilea.
Yeah. It's just a little, and then, the whole way that they're looking at each other when they're merging to save the Earth and everything like that, a little too much for me on that. As I think about it now as a middle-aged gentleman.
I can understand where you're coming from with that. I appreciate that reaction. I will say that scene between Decker and Kirk, when Kirk comes to relieve him of command of the Enterprise and engineering, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But there's a good 20 minutes to a half an hour after that, especially the whole Decker, you're baiting with me. Seema.
Yes.
That kind of drives me a little crazy. So does This Is How I Define Unwarranted.
Right.
Just because it's very spiteful.
Mm-hmm.
But
I will say one of the things that I did like, and I didn't know this at the time, is how Decker was the son of Commodore Decker. I thought that was a great tie into what is now canon. I always liked that aspect of his character, but not much else.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. The whole Spock outside the ship and the thruster suit scene, I thought that was fascinating. I actually enjoy that sequence even more now. I'm glad that they fixed it for subsequent releases of home video, because you would see Kirk get into his thruster suit and you could see a plywood wall behind him that was not all the way built out because they were rushing this thing to theaters. So they fixed that, which is nice. But I do like that, especially the scene in sickbay afterwards where Spock says, V'ger doesn't understand this. The touch of humans.
Is this all that I am?
Yeah. Is there nothing more? Right. And it's such a great scene with Spock. And that, again, more classic Star Trek, right? Here we have a machine that is rescued by other machines, a living planet of machines, if you will. And it fixes this wayward satellite and it becomes this. Now, too much similarity to Nomad, do you think? Or is it different enough where that criticism is kind of doesn't work for you?
I think it's very similar, but I think it works great. Here's the problem I have with V'ger, though, and this is going to be hard to explain, is in that scene you were just talking about Spock going through the starfish entry port or whatever. That's what I like to call it because it's just kind of weird. I've always had a really hard time accepting, I guess is the best word, how gigantic V'ger actually is. And he's just traveling through this thing and seeing stars, whole galaxies stored there. Now, granted, could it be a holodeck type of thing where it's not really as big as it makes as V'ger's making it look? I mean, you can tell how big V'ger is when they show the Enterprise next to it and it's just this little tiny speck. But that whole thing of how gigantic this thing is, and they don't catch it until it's 3 days away from Earth, is a little tough to swallow. But, like you said, there's always some things with each movie that is hard to take. But to your point, I think it is very much like Nomad, but this is funny. It's very much like Nomad, but in a very different way. The other thing that I wanted to bring out in regards to V'ger, which I've always liked, and it's not canon, but we've talked about it before, is one of the Shatner novels. You find out that V'ger was actually the planet that saved, quote unquote, V'ger and turned it into what it became was the Borg homeworld. So the Borg was actually tied to V'ger, which I thought was kind of interesting. It may not be believable, and there may be mistakes with it. And Spock was about to be assimilated in the book, but they stopped right at the last second because they already realized that he had been in contact because he mind melded with the Ilea probe when he was traveling in V'ger.
Yeah, that was a story element I've never really bought, and I think is just sloppy. Mm-hmm. Because the Borg don't, catch and release necessarily.
Right. True, that's a good point.
They either wouldn't have been interested in Voyager, in the Voyager satellite in the beginning, or they would have kept it and assimilated it into their own perfection. Mm-hmm. So I know I get that it's a creative idea for a book. I'm sure it tells a great story because, Judy and Garfield Reeve Stevens essentially wrote all those for Shatner.
Sure.
They're listed as co-writers, but I'm pretty sure Shatner has never seen, has never read the full books of any of those. But no, I get that it's entertaining. I get that it makes people think and talk, and that's fantastic. It's just a story that I could never buy into, and I checked out of it immediately.
Sure.
So
that's understandable.
Where do you think Star Trek the Motion Picture falls in the pantheon of Star Trek movies?
If I were to rate them, you mean? Well,
sure. Let's go with that.
For me personally, and I look at how I rate things is just how much I enjoy them, not particularly whether it's true Star Trek or stuff like that. It's one of my favorites because of the different things we've talked about, the music, and it makes me remember my childhood and stuff like that. I would say it's probably, for me, it might be in the top 5 of ones that I just enjoy, which is is amazing because I hear people talk about how much they hate it. I mean, one of the things that I always get aggravated when watching The Big Bang Theory is how Sheldon always insults the motion picture. And it's like, come on, man. I love this character, but yeah, you're just driving me crazy when you say something like that because I love it so much.
Wow. I never even thought about that. I have to say that, for a while, I thought it was among the worst of Star Trek movies. And it's really in the last several years, probably since we've been doing Trek Geeks, that I've really thought about this one and where it falls. And I actually think this is one of the best Star Trek movies of all time. People can dog on it for it being slow. People can dog on it for, having some awkward moments in dialogue. But I have to tell you, it tells the most Star Trek story probably of all the movies, maybe with the exception of Star Trek 4, the one with the whales. It's more than just a bad guy. It's more than just, we've got to neutralize, this invasion of Earth. It's about an intelligence greater than our own that we don't understand, that we try to make contact with. Granted, there's a threat, but it's not malicious necessarily. It's V'ger trying to come home and touch the creator. Right. And that's what compelling science fiction does, right? I mean, it tells a story that's plausible, and there doesn't necessarily always have to be a bad guy like Star Trek movies have now. So for me, I got to say it's top 5, if not probably top 3. I adore this film now, and I have such a greater appreciation for it than I did as a kid, or even in my 20s and 30s, honestly.
I'm really glad to hear that, because we've talked before about, how you fell asleep when you saw it for the first time, and that you never really liked it growing up. And it's one that I hold so close to me. I just love it. I mean, Star Trek 2, obviously everybody is probably going to rank that as number 1. Motion picture, like you said, top 3, top 5, maybe top 3. And here's another one that's probably going to send some people off the deep end is the reboot of 2009 is one of my favorites also, because it's a reboot and it's good. There's different things in each movie to hold on to and love and appreciate. And for me, TMP, it's just one of those. It's like when you look at when you're looking at a photo album and you find something that from your childhood that you haven't seen in 30 years, and it just brings it all flooding back of how much you loved it. That happens with me with TMP whenever I watch it, and it's not like it's been 30 years since I've seen it. I've seen it, hundreds of times. It's just one that it's got a very special place for me.
In my world, there are 12 Star Trek movies, but there is one Star Trek film, and this one is it. It's all the other ones are have lots of action and lots of bad guys and all that stuff. But this is, for me, a true film in every sense of the word, and I love it. I love it so much now that I'm glad that I've developed the appreciation for it at this phase of my life, and not really before now, because I think it's caused me to love it even more.
Good. I like to hear that. We should do a Mystery Science Theater 3000 version of watching the motion picture.
So you mean Trek Geeks Theater?
Exactly. That's what I meant to say. Like we did for Miri. Yes. Yeah. But of course, a lot of it, with you, some of it would be just your silhouette, kind of like sleeping. If we want to. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got to wake up. Dan, another thing we love beyond words, 5-year mission, buddy. They are every ounce of music you hear on Trek Geeks. We're so thrilled that they allow us to use their music for each and every episode of the podcast. Seriously, the opening theme, the end theme, every segment bumper you hear, it's all from albums you can buy right now on 5yearmission.net. Please head on over there, get all their stuff, get ready for year 4, because it's coming before you know it. And we swear you're going to be as big of fans as we are. That's at 5yearmission.net. Get those tunes in your ear holes, yo.
What's great? Year 4 we're talking about is coming out soon. They wrapped up their Kickstarter program. And I got to say, Bill, I don't know if you were aware of this. They did reach the goal that they needed for a 5-year mission, possibly beefcake calendar.
Oh, there's no possibly about it. It's going to be some beefcake.
And I hope that Mark is wearing his Trek Geek spaghetti strap tank top in one of those pictures.
I can only hope so. That would make my day. I would print that out poster size and hang it in my office.
That's a little scary. But you know what isn't scary? Is great Star Trek episodes like the one I just watched recently. It's always fun, Bill, to see those Alpha Quadrant aliens show up in the Delta Quadrant, isn't it? It's a little strange, but at the same time, it's kind of cool to see. Well, this episode of Voyager was no different, my man. You know, the crew of the Voyager came across an old Klingon D7 battlecruiser, and their crew had been searching for something for literally generations. And when they came across Voyager, they believed that they had found it. And it was actually B'Elanna's unborn child as the ultimate drummer in the Klingon Empire. Check out the episode. It's great. It's Prophecy.
You want to say that again?
Prophecy.
Yes, you know, there are a lot of Voyager episodes I either don't remember or just I haven't seen, and that one sounds terrible, even if without the FARC stuff.
It's not.
It sounds absolutely. It sounds absolutely putrid.
Can I be honest? It's not a great episode.
It's also not a great title to add FARC to, because it's really hard to say, because you have a passing familiarity with the English language.
Just a little bit.
It's like you guys speed dated and you decide that it wasn't going to work out between the two of you. You in English, that is.
Yeah. I can't even talk because I'm laughing. Yeah, it wasn't my best, but you know, I have next week to get better, right?
Oh, I think we've been hoping for that for 3 years now, and it still hasn't happened. But yeah, 5yearmission.net. Despite Dan's horrible Farkism this week, please buy all of their music and make it so. Dan, next week, you and I are going to discuss a topic that we've discussed and even joked about many times, both here on Trek Geeks and in the real world.
Yeah, we've actually talked about it with a particular actor as well at STLV, and this is going to be a fun episode. They're all fun, but this is going to be really fun. It's been a running gag for a long time. You know, poor Ensign Harry Kim. Not only was he never promoted during his entire time on Voyager, but this dude was the target for many an episode. So next week, it's all about Harry in a special Harry Kim Must Suffer extraordinaire. Next week on Trek Geeks, your independent Star Trek podcast.
Oh, fantastic. I can't wait. That poor guy, not Garrett, but Harry specifically.
Yes.
That poor kid. I tell you what. Dan, we want to remind everyone they can subscribe to both Trek Geeks and to Discovering Trek, Star Trek Discovery Companion, simply by just going to podfleet.com. There you can find out the variety and multitude of ways you can get both of our independent Star Trek podcasts directly to your mobile devices. And of course, for more great Star Trek discussion, head on over to the Tricorder Transmissions online at thetricordertransmissions.com. And lastly, Dan, for all the news on all the Star Treks, please visit our dear friends at treknews.net. For now, this has been episode 126 of the Trek Geeks podcast. We do hope you all live long and prosper.
Is this coconut all that I am? Is there nothing more?
I'd call that coconut unwarranted, Emerald.
Oh, nice. See, I like that. You know, you're working with me. You know, there's hope.
Bing bong.
Bing bong.
Wow, you sound like the foghorn on third down at Gillette Stadium.
Or more complex than brown.
Oh,
much
very nice.
Superior.
I can't get that low, so I will not even say the old ones.
The old ones. Yes, It had been so long I had forgotten.
That's pretty good.
That's what happens in the morning.
So is this how you went from Spock to Spook? You were thinking of Ruck?
I might have been. Yes, absolutely.
Help me, Spook. Help me, Spook.
Resistance cancels out programming. I love him. He's so good.
The thing is, too, is Ted Cassidy's voice turns up so many times in TOS.
It does. And it's great every time.
You remember watching the Banana Splits as a kid?
1 banana, 2 banana, 3 banana.
No, don't do that, because then, we got to take it off Spotify.
Oh, that's true.
But his voice would turn up in the animated shorts for all those, Banana Splits cartoons also, which I always thought was interesting.
The only thing I remember about Banana Splits is the song and the trying to go up the slide and falling in the beginning opening credits.
Yeah.
And then you heard that boing noise when they would fall.
Do you remember their names?
Dougal, Moogle, Snork, something like that. I don't know.
I think Snork is right. I got to Google this now.
Yeah, it was. I loved all those old shows, Banana Splits and Wonder Bug and Dr. Shrinker, all those shows that were on after school when I got home. Those were all classics.
Let's see. There was Fleagle, who was on guitar and vocals.
Mm-hmm.
There was Bingo, who was on drums. Drooper, who played bass, and Snorky, who played keys.
Snorky. I don't even remember that they played a band.
I do vaguely.
Huh. Could that be the seed which grew into 5-Year Mission?
No.
I would not think so. No, not at all.
No. It was a Hanna-Barbera thing. It ran for 2 seasons and only a 31 episode plus some shorts, which is amazing because Channel 56 in Boston played that thing for 7 freaking years.
Oh my God. I always had it on. But I could see 5-Year Mission doing the opening credits where they're falling up the slide. That would be quite funny.
Oh, see, that would be good if they covered the Banana Split song, which I think is called Tra La La.
That would be hysterical. Let's get them on that.
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to jump right away, Dan.
That could be one of their final perks for the Kickstarter.
The guy they sued, they're just going to come straight to you.
It gets them out there. People see them. People love them more because we love them, right?
Believe it or not, it ran for 31 episodes on NBC Saturday mornings from 1968 to 1970.
Wow. Huh. I did not know that. That's amazing.
And even though it was a Hanna-Barbera thing, the costumes were designed by Sid and Marty Krofft.
Yes, they do look like that. They look like a lot of things like Sigmund the Sea Monster type of costume stuff. Yeah.
And the series sponsor was Kellogg's.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
Which I didn't know either.
Breakfast cereal, Yeah. Cool. Banana Split. Wow. That's really reaching into the old memory vault, isn't it?
Well, here's another one. So you remember, since you and I both watched, obviously, Banana Splits, they used to have a series of sometimes live action shorts that were attached to it.
Yes.
And there was one called Danger Island. Do you remember that?
I do not remember that one.
And Mike in the van, who listens to Trek Geeks, will knows about this because he and I have talked about this. But it starred Jan Michael Vincent.
Oh, my.
Who at the time went by Michael Vincent. And there was a character named Chongo. And whenever Chongo made an appearance, it was kind of like Treasure Island, but for kids. It was usually, uh-oh, Chongo!
That, I vaguely remember that.
And Chongo ran around going, ay. It was...
I'm looking at a cast picture, and it's the older guy who looks like a scientist. Is that Worf's father from TNG? It looks just like him. Huh.
No, I don't think it is.
Okay.
No, in fact, I remember that guy for some other stuff.
All right.
Like Mannix or whatever. Just like 70s procedural TV shows, that type of thing.
He has all the diagrams and specs at home.
No, it definitely wasn't that guy. Okay. Wow. See, now I gotta just so many memories now with Chongo.
Chongo. I'm gonna have to look that up now. Chongo.
Oh, there's episodes on YouTube, my friend.
Oh, I'm sure there is. I don't want to do them now, though, because we kind of got a show to do, but probably be more fun.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we probably should do that.
I'm ready.
You are?
I'm born ready.
Tra-la-la. Sorry.
No.
I did 3 notes. I don't think they're going to get us for that.
No, I think you're safe.
Although I don't think they're going to bag us if you decide to sing 5-Year Mission again. I mean, the band will sue us, but that's different.
There's no need for me to sing 5-Year Mission. Why spoil greatness is how I look at it now, right?
Wow. You were... that is such a turnabout
now,
for
that
you.
could be taken 2 ways. Why sing a song that is already great and it's just going to hurt it? Or why should I bothering my greatness with singing a song from 5-Year Mission? I'm going to go with the former, but I would not be surprised if some people thought it would be the latter. But I'm not that way. I'm positive. I'm here to help.
I've not had enough coffee yet so far to parse that. So by the way, what are you drinking?
I got some brown sugar crumble donut coffee going today.
Nice. I have a cinnamon sugar cookie.
I was going to do that, but we're getting low, and I don't want to drink it because my wife loves it so much. So
getting low. You just bought 47 boxes.
Yeah, but we split them. We split them between here and Nashua. So she has two or three a day, or 2 a day at least. So it's not.
That's 23 and a half boxes a piece.
23. I don't think it was that many. It could have been. It would have been great, but still, she's still up here during the week by herself. I don't want her to run out of coffee. It might not be this week. It might be another week, but that wouldn't be nice. It wouldn't be fair. And
she's drinking all that coffee in celebration, is what you're saying.
It could be, but I'm peace and tranquility. I want everybody to be happy. So let her have her coffee.
I don't want to sabotage your tranquility.
We were talking last night about something before the game, and she said the word sabotage, and I went, sabotage. And she was looking at me like, what are you talking about?
That's the look I give you just about every day at the office.
It is.
All right, you ready?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.